Hello, Ghostbusters.
They're real.
You do? You have?
They're here.
Hello, and welcome to Film Rant. Originally I had no intention of ever reviewing this movie, but because my review of the latest iteration in the Ghostbusters franchise received a lot of positive comments and requests for me to review the original, I thought I'd get around and do it. Now this review will have some strange comparisons as I only watched this movie for the first time a few days ago. I saw the new Ghostbusters movie before this one, so instead of comparing the new one to the original, I'm going to compare the original to the new one, a sort of backwards comparison if you will. Also keep in mind that throughout this review I'm watching this for the first time as an adult and in 2016, 32 years after its original release. I will be reviewing it in the same way as I review all other movies, and not as an old classic movie. You may wonder why I'm stating that, but it will become clear with the points I raise. I'm going to talk about spoilers, but if you're watching this review, it's safe to assume that you've already seen it. So firstly, I want to say how much I fucking loved Bill Murray in this movie. I suppose that doesn't come as a surprise to a lot of you, but he was undoubtedly the highlight of the show. He's extremely witty, oozes a certain charm and charisma, and is actually a very engaging character. One of the more interesting things I noticed about Bill Murray's character is that it's like he's aware he's in a movie. I'm not talking about the Deadpool aware you're in a movie thing, but more like he secretly knows he's in a movie. Or as some of you crazy kids say, he low-key knows he's in a movie. Like the Doc in Back to the Future. While the Doc seems to act theatrically a lot of the time and moves around the frame in an almost self-aware manner, Bill Murray just doesn't really react to shit at all in this movie. Shit hits the fan and he's just like, fuck if I care, I'll live at the end and that's all that matters. Obviously it's just his character, but I find it interesting to note that he acts like he's aware he's in his own movie. There's also a small scene early on in the movie where a guy is waiting for an elevator and he asks the Busters who they are. Murray tells him they're the Exterminators. I like to think of that as Bill Murray not wanting to diverge the batshit crazy script he's taken part in. But yeah, Bill Murray was fucking awesome. I don't have too much to say about Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd, or Egon and Ray respectively, so I'll combine them. Ray seems to be the dopey one of the group, but not the annoying Chris Hemsworth style dopey, I mean actually well written type dopey. I liked Ray, but he doesn't really stand out to me for any particular reason. To me, Egon seemed the most relatable character. He's very level-headed and is clearly the brains of the group. Egon has some killer one-liners in the movie and I loved watching him, although it's sort of off-putting watching it in 2016 because he really looks like Christian Bale. Where are the ghosts? I really like what I saw from Ernie Hudson, who plays Winston. The only criticism I have of his character is that he wasn't introduced early enough. By the time we meet Winston, the other three Ghostbusters are well established and we already know who they are and what they're all about. As a group, they're already tighter than a camel's arse in a sandstorm too, so introducing Winston late I feel made him seem like a bit of a tag-along. If he was there from the start or introduced much earlier, I think we could have gotten a lot more out of his character and he'd feel a lot more integrated into the group. This will probably sound really obvious, but the best aspect of Ghostbusters without doubt is the comedy. There was never really any moments where there was a complete knee slapper, but I did find myself chuckling at the odd line or two. Some of the comedy is just well written stuff. I love the gag about Louis Tully getting a double workout because he watched the video on 2x speed. To bring this round to the new movie, that's good stupidity comedy instead of Chris Hemsworth's ha 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 I can't answer the phone joke. I love the Go Get Her Ray callback at the end as that loops the film right back to the start, and I really enjoyed the spoof The Exorcist scene where Bill Murray just doesn't react at all to all the devilish contortions Sigourney Weaver is exhibiting, because I'm telling you, he knows he's in a movie. Some of you may not have noticed either, but I think there's a The Shining reference later in the movie. I just happened to notice the scooter in this shot. I don't know, maybe I'm looking at it too hard, but I'd say that's a The Shining reference. Ghostbusters also utilises visual comedy very well, such as when Bill Murray is arguing with a receptionist and then suddenly Egon appears from under the desk. It's very simple, but it gets a chuckle. If I was to compare it to the comedy in the new movie, it's easy to see how comedy has changed over the years. The best comparison I could think of was the scene near the beginning where Bill Murray is questioning the legitimacy of the library lady's claim that she saw a ghost. He asks her a bunch of questions and ends on, "Are you menstruating?" To which the guy next to him takes offence to. Bill Murray then says, "Back off man, I'm a scientist." Okay, that got a little laugh out of me. It also shows a lot about Bill Murray's character. Now if that same joke was in the new Ghostbusters, it would have been something along the lines of Kristen Wiig asking the woman if she's menstruating and then Holtzman saying, "Ha, she has a vagina." The comedy in the original Ghostbusters is intelligently dumb, and it's easily the best aspect of the movie.
Power grid was shut off by Dickless here.
They caused an explosion.
Is this true?
Yes, it's true. This man has no dick.
Now, I said I'm not reviewing this movie as an old classic, but I feel I have to comment on the difference in filmmaking techniques used in this movie compared to how movies are made today. Ghostbusters explains basically nothing. It moves at a really fast pace early on. The group are formed, they suddenly have their weapons and devices to capture ghosts, and then they go on ghost-busting sprees. While it moves fast and doesn't explain much, it still doesn't lose any cohesion or understanding. I always knew exactly what was going on, and I just put the dots together that Egon must have developed all the tech. There's a phrase in filmmaking called leading the audience by the hand, which is basically self-explanatory. You guide the audience through the story by hand. Now, there's a fine line between doing that and being that really annoying family member that reads all the plaques at museums. Newer movies, specifically the new Ghostbusters, feel the need to explain every mortal detail of the story. The first hour or so of the new Ghostbusters is used to bring the group together, explain how their tech is developed, hire Kevin, and explain the ghosts and villains. In the original, the receptionist just appears along with the tech and ghosts, and by an hour in, Bill Murray is already taking the piss out of The Exorcist. I much prefer the old setup. Just tell your story, the audience aren't dumb. We can piece together most of the blanks if there's not too big a jump. There's also not much of a third act in the original, which seemed to be a sort of trope of 80s movies. Die Hard 1 and 2 have very little third acts. The hero vanquishes the villain, leaves the battle arena, and then the movie ends. Modern movies often have quite long third acts, looking at you, Return of the King, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Some movies need them. Thankfully though, Ghostbusters didn't, and I feel it ended very well. There was a couple of issues with the script for me though. They're minor things though, so don't start freaking out. I would have liked to have seen a bit more ghost busting early on. The group take out the ghost at that upper class function, then we see the headlines pour across the screen like in Spider-Man. But we never see the Ghostbusters raid buildings and bust ghosts during their rise to fame. Maybe it's because I've grown up with the early 2000s Marvel movies like the aforementioned Spider-Man, but I just wanted to see more of our heroes do their thing before the big villain comes in, just like we see in Spider-Man. I would have also liked to have seen the Marshmallow Man get a bit more screen time. It seems he was literally the main villain's form, and I feel like he was taken down a little too quickly. I just wanted to see him fuck shit up more. There was also a very odd scene during that Rise to Fame segment of the movie. There isn't really much to say about this, but it sort of made me double take, so I feel it's worth mentioning. I'm talking about the scene where it seems Ray is getting a blowjob from a ghost. I get that it's played for laughs, but I was just watching it and then all of a sudden I was like, whoa, what the fuck? I don't really know what to say about it. I don't even know if I liked it or not. I just thought it was a bit out of place and it seemed a little odd. But hey, at least it wasn't like that scene from Poltergeist. In terms of the technical aspects of the movie, I feel I just have to mention the VFX. For its time, the effects in this movie are pretty good, generally. I mean, the dog demons at the end are a little goofy, but you can get away with that in a goofy movie. I actually preferred the look of the ghosts in this movie to the new one. They looked a lot more like ghosts and not like enemies from The Witcher 3. I think the movie still holds up well and the effects were still perfectly watchable. Now, I can't give Ghostbusters a proper review without commenting on the soundtrack, and I think you all know what I'm going to say here, and that is that Ghostbusters has a fucking kick-ass tune. That's all I want to say really. Props to the composers for making such an iconic and memorable theme tune to such a classic and well-loved movie. It's just a shame Fall Out Boy ruined it. I want to end the review just talking about how, to me, this movie has something I like to call Hitchcock syndrome. Now, what's Hitchcock syndrome, I hear you asking? Well, I'm sure all of you know who Alfred Hitchcock is, one of the most respected directors of all time and a pioneer of cinema. Universally renowned by film critics and scholars worldwide, and his movies are often considered some of the best ever. I have nothing but respect for the guy, but when I watch his movies, there's not really much about them that impress me. Not necessarily because they're badly done, but simply because I've seen it 100 times before in more modern movies that have copied his techniques. So Hitchcock syndrome is a term I use to describe movies that may have been revolutionary in their time, but since movies that follow it have copied their tropes and techniques, it may not seem that impressive watching it years later when you've seen all the tropes it has 100 times before. That's basically my view of Ghostbusters. It is a great movie that has some fantastic comedy and great chemistry between characters with a goofy but comprehensible story and some truly crazy shit going on, but it's also a movie I've seen before in other movies, with some tropes done better. This is why at the start I mentioned that I'm watching this movie as an adult in 2016, 32 years after its original release. I can absolutely respect that Ghostbusters is an iconic movie, and I have a lot of respect for it as it really set fire to the buddy comedy adventure genre, and if it didn't exist, then there's quite a few movies that wouldn't either as a result. You may notice this is one of my shorter reviews, and that's simply because I couldn't find an awful lot to talk about with it. Ghostbusters doesn't do much wrong, and I've mentioned all of the elements that I thought were good. Ghostbusters is a thoroughly enjoyable comedy and I'd watch it again, but it didn't blow my socks off. Ghostbusters gets 3.5 frames out of 5. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Film Rant.
Weaver, Harold Ramis, Rick Moranis. Coming to save the world. Who you gonna call? Ghostbusters.